In his mercurial rise from an unknown German corporal to the Führer of the Third Reich, Adolf Hitler led Germany on a vengeful conquest of the world.
In 1932, the Depression is far from over, but the year marks a turning point. Franklin Delano Roosevelt is elected to the White House, and unlike Hoover, he listened to the pleading economists. Despite rabid fears in America of any government program that sounds like collectivism or socialism, FDR begins a courageous campaign of work programs and economic reforms, known simply as the New Deal. Government-sponsored programs like the WPA build great public works and bring a vital injection of cash back into the stalled-out economy. FDR is taking the advice of economists by running up a national deficit and spending his way out of the Depression. It slowly brings hope and money back to the people and, more importantly, begins to restore consumer confidence to buy. This jumpstart slowly turns over the great pistons of the economic engine. Work programs are working in other nations around the world, too. Ominously, Adolf Hitler becomes chancellor about the same time that FDR takes office, and his extensive public works programs are reinvigorating the German economy. Of course, unknown to the rest of the world, he's preparing for war. The Germans are angry about being reduced from a powerful empire to an impoverished people under the heavy burden of post-war reparations. After the armistice ending the Great War, one German corporal writes, "Everything went black before my eyes. I buried my aching head between the blankets and the pillow. During these nights, my hatred increased for the originators of this dastardly crime." Perhaps no one understands the power of the German people's resentment better than the young corporal who authored these words, Adolf Hitler. Hitler is serving a jail term for his part in an attempted coup in Bavaria, known as the Beer Hall Putsch. But after 4 years, he emerges from his cell with a manifesto of hate and blame, entitled Mein Kampf, or My Struggle. Its themes of anti-Semitism and racial superiority make it the basis of Hitler's resurrected Socialist Party and eventually a Bible for the Nazi regime. Without laying out any concrete plans for economic reform, the mere power and vigor of Hitler's patriotic speeches plays well to the desperate masses. He gives hope and pride back to the German people, who are desperate to believe that they are in fact a proud Aryan race.
One reason Hitler made it is the Treaty of Versailles, 1919, which punished Germany unbelievably and was a treaty of vengeance by the French primarily. Secondly, it's the Depression, because between Versailles in 1919 and the Depression 1929, Germany became quite calm because economically they were doing relatively well. And then came the Depression and everything went downhill.
After 2 failed campaigns for chancellorship and a bid to share power with President von Hindenburg, Hitler is finally appointed Chancellor of Germany. His followers are ecstatic. Stormtroopers stomp down the streets with burning torches, ushering in the dawn of the new Reich and the coming of Adolf Hitler and his disciples, Rudolf Hess, Hermann Göring, Alfred Rosenberg, Joseph Goebbels, and Heinrich Himmler. Propaganda mastermind Joseph Goebbels writes in his diary, "It was almost like a dream, a fairy tale. The new Reich had been born. 14 years of work has been crowned with victory. The German Revolution has begun." Hitler wastes no time in implementing his policies. 5 hours after being sworn in as Chancellor, Hitler and Hermann Göring begin to dismantle the remains of the weak German democracy. An excited Goebbels writes, "Now it will be easy to carry on the fight. We can call on all the resources of the state. Radio and press are at our disposal. We shall stage a masterpiece of propaganda." Ironically, in the 1936 Olympic Games in Berlin, Jesse Owens and several black teammates beat out the Aryan supermen, shattering Hitler's claim of Aryan superiority in front of the entire world. Hitler's influence continues to grow, and after the death of President von Hindenburg, Hitler assumes absolute control of Germany. The new Führer's first move is to take back the contested Rhineland from the French. He has only 3 battalions and limited air support, but the stronger French army is bluffed into submission. And in direct conflict with the Treaty of Versailles, Hitler arms Germany for war. In March 1938, Hitler triumphantly marches into Austria, annexing the country and welcoming it to the dawn of the 1,000-year Reich. Crowds of excited Austrians wave Nazi flags and drop flowers at his feet.
Hitler was admired by an awful lot of people. After all, fascism was the thing to do. In 1936, Balfour, the former Prime Minister of Great Britain, went to Germany and had an interview with Hitler. And he came back and published an article in the Daily Telegraph. It was just glowing. What a wonderful person Hitler is. So sincere and peace-loving.
In September of 1938, Nazi troops advance again, storming into the Sudetenland region of Czechoslovakia. The international community is disturbed, but most leaders' fears are allayed when British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain meets with Hitler in Munich. He receives assurances that Germany has no other territorial claims to make in Europe. According to Hitler, he only wants to liberate the 3.5 million Germans living in the region lost under the Treaty of Versailles. Chamberlain relents and makes his famous statement that there will not be a repeat of the Great War, but peace in our time. After the conference, Winston Churchill warns, "Do not suppose this is the end. This is only the beginning of the reckoning." Conferring with Italian fascist dictator Benito Mussolini the night before meeting with Chamberlain, Hitler himself predicts that sooner or later there will be a fight with England. He does not count on any strong resistance from the democracies of Europe or America. They seem to be weak with decadence, indecision, and polluted racial strains. On September 1st, Churchill's prophecy comes true. Hitler's forces bomb Poland. His tanks and stormtroopers move in with terrifying speed, overrunning the country. After 2 days, Britain and France are forced to declare war. In November of 1936, it's become clear that the Japanese are aligning themselves with the Germans. They meet in Berlin to sign the Japanese-German Convention, which is also signed by Italy's Benito Mussolini, bringing the three Axis powers into step. Later in the same year, Japan withdraws from the London Naval Disarmament Conference, an ominous sign that it's beginning to build up its fleet of warships. The Japanese already control Manchuria, but in 1937, a border skirmish with the Chinese opens the door for a full-scale invasion of eastern China. And in Europe, the war begins in earnest. Just as in the Great War before, Hitler's forces push through Belgium and commence an attack on France. The Allies are taken back by the speed of the German advance. Within days, France is overcome. Thousands of English and French soldiers are pushed back to the sea. They're desperately evacuating from the beach at Dunkirk as waves of military and even civilian boats come to their rescue. As France falls to the Germans, Mussolini declares war, bringing Italy into the action and a share of the spoils. With a stroke of poetic vengeance, Hitler forces the French to surrender in the same boxcar used by the defeated Germans in World War I. In America, public opinion is still against the war, and with the fall of France, Britain is now utterly alone.
Elated by his conquest of Poland and France, Hitler turned his attention to Great Britain. He knew that the key to taking the island nation was to crush their air force before trying to land troops on the beach. But Hitler found that this was no easy task.
In August 1940, Hitler launches his Luftwaffe against Britain in an operation dubbed Day of the Eagle. It's an attempt to crush the British Air Force, paving the way to an all-out invasion. But he is sorely disappointed. As the air battles rage on for days over the skies of Britain, British pilots prove their skill, destroying the enemy fighters 2-1. The British pilots that are shot down frequently jump into a new plane, bringing the fight right back to the Germans.
Never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few.
Frustrated by the air war, Hitler begins to bomb London itself, hoping to break the will of the British people. Londoners are bombed and burned out of their homes, but take to the subways and cram into neighbors' apartments. Determined as ever, they go back to work in the morning. London continues to live and produce war materials.
Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war.
Unable to take Britain by air, the Nazis begin a U-boat campaign, torpedoing supply ships before they can reach English docks. The Fuhrer thinks he will starve out the resistance. In the meantime, FDR is pushing the Lend-Lease Act through the American Congress. Comparing America to a man who is watching his neighbor's house burn down, Roosevelt calls on his depressed country to become an arsenal of democracy. The loan of war equipment, he says, is like lending that neighbor your garden hose. He can give it back once the fire is put out. While the invasion of Britain is on hold, Hitler turns to his plans for the invasion of Russia. Despite a secret non-aggression treaty with Stalin, Hitler commences Operation Barbarossa, a land invasion designed to seize Western Russia. With a surprise attack, the German army stabs deep into Russian territory and lays siege to the city of Stalingrad. But like Napoleon before him, Hitler's troops encounter stubborn Russian resistance and bitter cold. Despite starvation and terrible house-to-house fighting, the Russians hang on to their city, eating nothing but scraps and leather. As the siege wears on into winter, the ill-equipped German ranks find themselves besieged by the freezing temperature, which kills them by the thousands.